In 1985, Arnold Schwarzenegger stepped onto a fictional island compound as Colonel John Matrix, strapped with more firepower than most real-world platoons. He carried an Uzi submachine gun, a Desert Eagle pistol, a Remington 870 shotgun, Claymore mines, and an M60 machine gun that he fired with one hand like it weighed nothing. But none of those weapons became the icon. The weapon everyone remembers is the 4-barreled rocket launcher he shoulders during the final assault on Arius's villa, the boxy, brutal thing that fires 4 times and levels everything in its path. That weapon was the M202 FLASH, and what most people don't realize is that it wasn't invented for the movies. It was a real military weapon designed to replace the flamethrower, loaded with a chemical compound that burns white hot at 2,200 degrees Fahrenheit and ignites the instant it touches air. The United States military built it, issued it to soldiers, and then quietly pulled it from service because it kept trying to kill the men carrying it. This is the story of the weapon behind the most famous one-man army scene in action movie history, why it was built, why it failed, and why the movie that made it famous got almost everything about it wrong. If you're into the real stories behind the weapons Hollywood turned into myths, consider liking the video and subscribing. It really helps the channel. And we're just getting started, the M202 FLASH. The acronym stands for Flame Assault Shoulder Weapon, and the name tells you almost everything you need to know about its intentions. This was a 4-barreled, shoulder-fired rocket launcher designed to do one thing: replace the flamethrower. Before we go any further, think about what that sentence actually means. The United States military looked at the backpack-mounted flamethrower, a weapon that required a soldier to strap canisters of jellied gasoline to his back and walk within 47 yards of the enemy before pulling the trigger, and decided the problem wasn't the concept. The problem was the delivery system. The M2 flamethrower had been in service since World War II. It was used at Iwo Jima in Korea and deep in the tunnels of Vietnam. It was brutally effective at clearing bunkers and fortified positions. It was also a death sentence for the man pulling the trigger. The fuel canisters on a flamethrower operator's back weighed over 60 pounds when full. They turned every soldier carrying one into a slow-moving, highly visible target. Enemy snipers didn't need a difficult shot. They just needed to puncture a fuel tank. One well-placed round and the operator became the fire. And even when the weapon worked perfectly, the range was pathetic. 47 yards. That is less than half the length of a football field. A soldier had to close to within conversational distance of a fortified enemy position to use the weapon. That vulnerability weighed heavy on the men carrying those canisters through the jungles of Southeast Asia. And it was that problem, the vulnerability of the man behind the weapon, that made the M202 necessary. In October 1966, the United States Marine Corps issued a requirement that would change the trajectory of infantry incendiary warfare. They wanted a lightweight, shoulder-fired weapon that could deliver encapsulated flame rounds beyond 100 meters. 2 years later, the Army's 9th Infantry Division added urgency from the field. They needed a flame weapon that could operate at over 200 meters, beyond the effective range of most small arms fire. Lieutenant General Frank Mildren, who served as second in command of all American forces in Vietnam, would later describe the significance of the transition. The M202 represented a radical departure from traditional flamethrowers, he said. It relieved the field soldier from the burden of mixing flame fuels for the weapons. That one sentence captures the entire philosophy. The problem was never fire. The problem was keeping the man alive long enough to deliver it. The solution would come from 2 defense contractors. Northrop Corporation would build the launcher and the rocket engine. Brunswick would handle the fire mixture and organize mass production. The program was designated Ensure 263, and it would take over a decade to produce a finished weapon. The result was a weapon that looked like a metal suitcase with 4 tubes bolted inside it. It weighed about 12 pounds when empty, just under 27 pounds loaded. It could fire its 466mm M74 rockets one at a time at a rate of 1 per second, or all 4 simultaneously. The maximum range was 750 meters, roughly 5 times what any flamethrower operator had ever dreamed of reaching. But the real innovation wasn't the launcher. It was what was inside those rockets. The M74 warheads were loaded with approximately 1.34 pounds of a substance called TPA, thickened pyrophoric agent. This was not napalm, despite what nearly every article and movie review has claimed for the last 4 decades. Napalm was the previous generation's incendiary. TPA was something far worse. The active ingredient was triethylaluminum, an organometallic compound that ignites spontaneously the instant it contacts air. Not when you light it, not when you strike a match. The moment oxygen touches the liquid surface, it erupts. It burns white hot at temperatures between 1,400 and 2,200 degrees Fahrenheit, several hundred degrees hotter than napalm. It is so chemically aggressive that it burns underwater. It can cause first-degree burns from proximity alone without any direct contact with the flame, purely from thermal radiation. This was the weapon that John Matrix cradles in the sporting goods store armory during the second act of Commando. This was the weapon that Cindy, played by Rae Dawn Chong, aims backward at a police van before realizing she is holding it the wrong way. And this is the detail that turns a funny movie moment into something deeply unsettling. In the film, Cindy fires the M202 at the police van carrying Matrix after he is arrested for raiding the surplus store. The rocket hits the van, it flips, and Matrix climbs out to continue his rescue mission. It is played for laughs. Cindy even holds the launcher backward at first before turning it around, claiming she read the instructions. The whole scene is designed so the audience cheers. In reality, the M74 rocket would have filled that enclosed van with white-hot fire burning at over 2,000 degrees. The TPA would have coated every interior surface and continued to burn. It cannot be extinguished with water. It burns through rubber, through metal, through human skin. The Army's own training manual notes that the M202 is specifically effective against targets inside enclosed spaces like bunkers and vehicles because the fire has nowhere to go. Matrix would not have climbed out. He would have been incinerated. The screenwriters turned a weapon specifically designed to burn people alive inside enclosed spaces into a slapstick rescue device, and nobody blinked. The movie treats the M202 as if it fires ordinary explosive rounds. In truth, no explosive rounds were ever issued for the weapon. The military did experiment with a heat anti-tank warhead that could theoretically fit the same 66mm tube, since the M74 rocket shared its caliber with the M72 Law anti-tank launcher. But no such clips were ever manufactured for the M202. And every single rocket ever produced for this weapon was incendiary. It existed for one purpose only: to set things on fire from a safe distance. Commando played the same trick with almost every weapon in the film. The M60E3 machine gun that Schwarzenegger fires one-handed during the final assault had a professionally shortened barrel, making it lighter for the actor to handle. The same shortened M60 would later appear in Predator 2 years later, carried by Bill Duke's character Mac. Both films were supplied by Stembridge Gun Rentals, Hollywood's legendary armory, and the same guns literally moved from one Schwarzenegger movie to the next. In reality, even the lightened M60E3 weighs over 18 pounds. Firing it one-handed while standing would be physically possible for someone with Schwarzenegger's build, but the accuracy would be non-existent. The movie doesn't care about accuracy, it cares about spectacle. The reason Commando leaned so hard into spectacle has everything to do with Sylvester Stallone. Rambo. First Blood Part 2 came out 5 months earlier, and director Mark Lester panicked after seeing the body count. He told his crew they needed to slay more people than Rambo, and suddenly 150 extras were getting mowed down in the final assault. Schwarzenegger's kill count hit 130, nearly double Stallone's. That arms race is why the M202 ended up in the film at all. Lester needed a 4-barreled rocket launcher that made Stallone's single-shot RPG look modest. But here is where the M202's story starts to mirror the character carrying it. John Matrix is a man defined by overkill. He does not use proportional force. He uses everything available, all at once, with total disregard for collateral damage. He plants claymores around a compound, fires rocket launchers through windows, and carries an M60 in one hand while mowing down an entire private army. He kills 130 people in roughly 90 minutes of screen time and walks away without a scratch. The M202 FLASH was built with the same philosophy: maximum destruction from maximum distance, no half measures. The flaw in Matrix is that his violence always comes with a cost, even when the movie pretends it doesn't. It costs him the quiet mountain life he built with his daughter. It cost the film its original ending because the production spent so much money on the kill count that there was nothing left for the climax the screenwriter actually wrote. And it costs the franchise its future because the sequel was reworked into an entirely different kind of action movie. The flaw in the M202 was remarkably similar. It was supposed to be safer than the flamethrower. That was literally its reason for existing. But the weapon had a catastrophic problem that made soldiers dread it almost as much as the old backpack units. The rockets had a tendency to spontaneously ignite while being loaded into the launcher. Think about that for a moment. The entire selling point of this weapon was that it removed the danger from the operator. No more fuel tanks on the back, no more walking into enemy fire at close range. But in practice, the M202 introduced a new kind of danger. The rockets themselves were unstable. A soldier would slide the 4-round clip into the rear of the launcher, and during that process, the triethylaluminum warheads could crack, leak, contact air, and erupt. One malfunction during loading could ignite all 4 rockets simultaneously, consuming the operator in the very fire he was supposed to deliver to the enemy. The safety math was nightmarish even when everything worked correctly. The M74 rocket's bursting radius was approximately 20 meters, but the warhead didn't arm itself until it had traveled between 5 and 14 meters from the launcher. That meant the kill zone extended 6 meters beyond the arming distance. You could fire the weapon correctly, hit a target at minimum range, and still be inside the blast radius. And because the TPA filler was pyrophoric, meaning it ignites on contact with air rather than relying on a fuse, even a rocket that hit a hard surface and cracked open before arming would still burst into flames. Then there was the backblast. Every rocket launcher produces a dangerous zone behind the firer, and the M202 was no exception. The danger zone extended 50 feet directly behind the operator, with an additional 82 feet of caution zone where debris could be hurled by the exhaust. In Commando, Cindy fires the M202 from inside a convertible. In reality, the backblast alone would have killed anyone sitting in the back seat. The storage problems were arguably even worse. When M235 warheads sat in military depots for extended periods, the TPA tended to leak. Highly volatile liquid would seep from the rocket casings, creating a situation where warehouse personnel were handling ordnance that could spontaneously combust if the containment degraded by even a fraction. Entire ammunition bunkers were potentially one cracked seal away from catastrophe. The weapon designed to be safer than the flamethrower had simply traded one kind of danger for another. By the mid-1980s, the M202 had been relegated to storage. The weapon that was supposed to modernize incendiary warfare had been abandoned by the very soldiers it was designed to protect. The timing is grimly poetic. The same year the M202 was quietly being shelved by the military, Hollywood was putting it on the big screen and turning it into the most spectacular weapon in action movie history, and the version that appeared in Commando wasn't even real. The M202 that Schwarzenegger carries through the final act is a boxy prop replica built for the film. The actual M202 has a distinctive suitcase-like body with hinged covers, a folding pistol grip, and a collimating sight. The prop captures the general shape, but misses the structural details. The prop became so iconic, however, that it rewrote the weapon's visual identity. Video games like Resident Evil and Payday 2 along with anime and other action films, began modeling their M202s after the Commando prop rather than the genuine military article. Hollywood's fake became more famous than the military's original, but the M202 only appears once in Schwarzenegger's filmography, and there is a reason for that. The real M202 FLASH was not just difficult to use safely, it was ethically complicated. The Convention on Certain Conventional Weapons, adopted by the United Nations in 1980, placed restrictions on incendiary weapons used against personnel. While the convention did not explicitly ban the M202, it created mounting pressure on the United States to move away from weapons designed primarily to burn human beings. And there was a cruel irony built into the weapon's timeline. The M202 was designed to enter service for Vietnam, but the engineering took too long. The XM202 prototype was field tested by Marines in Southeast Asia during the late 1960s, but the finalized M202 didn't reach production until 1978, 3 years after the fall of Saigon. The war it was built for was already over. The weapon that was supposed to keep soldiers safer arrived too late to save anyone. Northrop Corporation manufactured the launchers under government contract through the late 1970s and early 1980s, but production never reached the scale that planners envisioned. Each rifle company was authorized just one launcher, generally issued one per platoon. There were no dedicated gunners. The weapon was assigned as an additional burden to riflemen who already had their own gear to carry. Nobody wanted the extra 27 pounds. Nobody wanted the responsibility of carrying something that might self-immolate in their hands. The Marines phased it out in the mid-1980s when the Mark 153 SMAW entered service, a conventional rocket launcher that abandoned the incendiary concept entirely. The M202 was the last flamethrower the United States would ever field, or so everyone assumed. In 2007, leaked equipment registries from U.S. Army units in Afghanistan revealed that M202A1 launchers were still listed in military inventories. Whether they were ever actually fired in the War on Terror remains unconfirmed, but the fact that they were still on the shelf 2 decades after being declared obsolete suggests the military never fully let go of the weapon. Old habits, especially ones that burn at 2,200 degrees, apparently die hard. And speaking of die hard, there is one more detail about Commando that makes the M202 story feel like destiny. After the film's release, a sequel was written by Steven D'Souza and Frank Darabont, based on the 1979 novel Nothing Lasts Forever by Roderick Thorpe. Schwarzenegger read it and passed. He wasn't interested in revisiting John Matrix. The script was reworked. The one-man army was replaced by a reluctant hero trapped in a building. The project was retitled Die Hard, and it went to Bruce Willis. The fictional country of Valverde from Commando even shows up again in Die Hard 2, a quiet nod to the franchise that almost was. The sequel to the movie that put the M202 FLASH in Schwarzenegger's hands became the film that killed the one-man army genre. Die Hard proved that audiences didn't need a character who could carry infinite ammunition and shrug off a small army. They wanted someone who got hurt, who bled, who walked barefoot on broken glass. John McClane was everything John Matrix was not. Vulnerable, scared, human, and that shift mirrors what happened to the weapon itself. The military didn't want invincible anymore. They wanted reliable. They wanted something that wouldn't kill the operator during a routine reload. The SMAW that replaced the M202 couldn't set an entire tree line ablaze, but it also never spontaneously combusted in a soldier's hands. The trade-off tells you everything about what the military learned from the M202's failures. The M202 FLASH was built to be invincible, a weapon that could deliver fire from beyond the reach of any enemy. But its own chemistry betrayed it. The triethylaluminum that made it so devastating also made it too dangerous to trust. The rocket that was supposed to save the operator kept threatening to kill him instead. John Matrix was written to be invincible too. A man who could bench press a phone booth and walk through gunfire without a scratch. But that version of the action hero had a shelf life. just like the weapon he carried. Within 3 years, the M202 was in storage, and John Matrix's own sequel had become someone else's franchise. The Invincible Man and the Invincible Weapon both learned the same lesson: you can burn too hot. And eventually, the thing that made you extraordinary is the same thing that makes you obsolete. If you found this breakdown as fascinating as I did, subscribe for more stories about the real weapons and real history hiding inside the movies you grew up on. Because this one isn't the only weapon Hollywood got completely wrong.